Good afternoon. My name is Bo Khan. I'm the ConocoPhillips Petroleum Associate Professor of Chinese and Asian Studies and the co-director of the OU Institute for U.S.-China Issues. Welcome to the Institute's speaker series on STEEP issues, which promote dialogue on security, technology, economic, environmental, public health, and political issues in U.S.-China relations. Before introducing today's speaker, please allow me to thank my colleagues, Stephanie Sager and Maura McAndrew, for providing the logistic assistance that has made this event possible. Before the Trump administration defined the U.S.-China relations as one of the great power rivalry, we already saw signs of U.S.-China rivalry in the Asia-Pacific region, which is increasingly renamed as the Indo-Pacific region. And U.S. policies toward the region have also attested to the continuity and escalation of this rivalry over the past couple of years. Under the Obama administration, the U.S. launched a pivot strategy that includes three components. Diplomatically, the strategy called for deepening alliances, partnerships, and coalitions in the region. Economically, it tried to expand trade engagement with the region through the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade program without China. And militarily, it aimed to enhance deterrence by redeploying U.S. military assets and beefing up capacity in the region. While the pivot strategy gained a lot of attention, it was high in symbolism, low in implementation substance. While the Trump administration walked away from the diplomatic initiatives, the Obama administration launched and withdrew the U.S. from the TPP. It rolled out a free and Indo-Pacific concept and revitalized the Quad security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States in 2017. These measures are focused on the security dimension and thus maintained some of the continuity of the U.S. rivalry with China launched under the Obama administration. And under the Biden administration, the U.S. has launched an enhanced Indo-Pacific strategy in February 2022 to revitalize all three prompt components under the Obama administration on the diplomatic, economic, and security dimensions, further raising the stakes of U.S. rivalry with China. So how has China responded to this rivalry, and how effective has U.S. strategy been, and how worried should we be about the growing rivalry between the two powers in the Asia-Pacific region? Is there a way we can find a way to manage and de-escalate the rivalry? To help us answer these questions, I'm delighted to introduce to you one of the leading experts on U.S.-China relations, Dr. Shen Dingli, with a doctorate degree in physics from Fudan University and a postdoc fellowship in arms control at Princeton University. Dr. Shen Dingli is a professor and a former executive dean at Fudan University's Institute of International Studies and a former director of Center for American Studies. He's co-edited 17 books and published over 2,500 articles and papers, primarily on U.S.-China relations, regional security, international strategy, arms control, nonproliferation. And in addition to having a prolific research profile, he has been a true leader in his professional field. For instance, he's currently vice president of Shanghai UN Research Association, Shanghai Public Policy Research Association. Previously, he served as a vice president of Chinese Association of South Asian Studies, Shanghai Association of International Studies, Shanghai Association of International Strategic Studies, and Shanghai Association of American Studies. Beyond China, he's on the Global Council of the Asian Society. He was an Eisenhower Fellow in 1996 and advised in 2002 the then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan for his strategic planning of second term. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me turn the podium to Dr. Shen, who will speak for about half an hour to 40 minutes. And after that, we'll have a Q&A. Dr. Shen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Kong. Thank you for offering me the opportunity to speak to audience in OU. And my topic today is on China-US relations. And both myself, my family, people, and today's chair, Professor Kong at OU, are beneficiary of China-US relationship. The two countries fought two wars in Korea and in Vietnam, and made themselves enemy. And due to table tennis, we call a small ball, which has turned around the bigger ball, the Earth planet, China-US re-engaged. And finally, on January the 1st, 1979, the two countries established a normal diplomatic relationship. At this time, I think there are about 300,000 Chinese students studying in the US. And there are also many American students studying in China and at my university, Fudan, as well. But unfortunately, over the years, especially over the last decade, China-US relationship has been developed in a more complicated way, and actually somehow declining. As Professor Kong just mentioned, during the Obama presidency, the White House launched pivoting or rebalancing, which has two components. One is to bring American armed force deployed in Middle East and in Europe to Asia. Therefore, America would have an adequate amount of military presence in Asia Pacific. At that time, not to have the term of Indo-Pacific. The major drive for US to do so is to not to increase its military budget, but to move American force in other parts of the world to China's neighborhood. The other component of the pivoting is the so-called TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a more free trade zone, a small zone consisting of 12 countries, US, Japan, etc., to allow more free, near zero trade tariffs in order to facilitate the intra-zone free trade, which also means to make a country not to belong to this TPP to have more difficulty to trade with a country inside this grouping, and China mostly are targeted. And when President Trump came to power, he withdrew America from TPP, but Japan completed the TPP anyway. Now it is called CPTPP without America. And President Trump launched a bilateral trade war directly with China. And nearing the end of his term, he made a trade agreement with China, which would ask China to import additional 200 billion of US dollar equivalents of goods from America over 2 years, 2020, 2021. And now with Joe Biden in power, he has much strengthened what has been invented by President Trump, which is called Indo-Pacific strategy, namely to bring the US Pacific Command and Central Command to make the two command to make them a bigger command, which is called Indo-Pacific Command, and under which America has more naval force, the 7th Fleet, the 5th Fleet, and the 6th Fleet. Therefore, US can, one command can use all resources within this vast ocean region to engage any country, any unit in the region, which means American military force deployed in Indian Ocean would have more coordination with American force in the Pacific to handle not primarily North Korea, but China. Everybody knows. So now I would talk about the new environment. US under President Joe Biden views China as the only power that has both intent and capacity to challenge America. Despite Russia's military meddling in Ukraine, some call operation, some call invasion, the US and NATO do not view Russia as a global player. Russia only disrupt the peace and stability in European theater, but China has capacity to emerge everywhere. In Europe, China's 1+17, China, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe economic program, which is a part of China's One Belt and One Road initiative. And in Asia Pacific, China is also expanding its Belt and Road strategy, and China has been, in Americans' view, flexing its muscle in building up 7 artificial islands in South China Sea, which in the US view is illegal. And the US cannot accept this, will continue to dispatch its vessel and warplane to the region to conduct its operation, which to allow freedom of navigation. And America views China to look at the experience and the lesson of Russia's military operation in Ukraine. Some say Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow, which may be read into completely different sense. One is Russia may take over Ukraine in days, in a week, and then the next target would be Taiwan. Mainland China will do something similar, surprise operation to make Taiwan to be reintegrated with the mainland. So this is some assertive version of this saying, Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow. But America prefer the other way to interpret this. That is, Ukraine would resist Russia, and Russia cannot take over Ukraine, and Ukraine would eventually win, would take back its foreign lands. And as long as Taiwan would stand to resist assertiveness, aggressions from outside, Taiwan also has a chance to defend its land, and America will be behind both Ukraine and Taiwan. So today, America views China to have the capacity. China has capacity of the fast train, and the US may have very few miles of fast train, but China has already developed more than 30,000 kilometers of fast train. How fast? 400 kilometers per hour. And in America, those Amtrak, which often makes trouble in America's railway system, the fastest speed may not exceed 200 kilometers per hour. So China's speed doubles that of the US. And China has planned to send its astronauts to the surface of the moon by 2030s. So China may become the second country to send its man and woman to the moon. US cannot accept this, even though US has sent Neil Armstrong to the moon much earlier than China would do. So US has assembled 12 men and 2 women in the last 2 years to train them, to send some of them back to the moon. But China has a plan to work with Russia to put a permanent research base on the moon. So America has withdrawn its human, and China may not deploy human being on the moon permanently, but China would set up a permanent research base that would make American to feel not comfortable. And China's third generation nuclear reactor has become a leading version of technology in the world. While America's Westinghouse has been purchased by Japan, so America is no longer owning any nuclear power plant, let alone America would buy any nuclear power plants. And China is becoming a country rapidly developing its clean and green technology to make China a green country. Now, for electrical vehicle, electrical car, China's technology and its cell are leading in the world. And Tesla is meeting strong challenges from China. And China's GDP has increased from 10% in the year 2000 to last year, 71%. Over some 2 decades, China has narrowed its gap with the US in economic output by 60%. So many would predict that around 2030 and no later than 2035, China's economic size would catch up with America at that time. China's defense budget has increased from about 5% of the US in the year 2000 to this year, 2023, 27%. So China has increased much, actually has increased more than 200 billions of US dollar, equivalent of Chinese resource to build up its military. So this is how I view, how American views China. China is developing very fastly. China has a big ambition, and even worse, China has its system, which is a one-party system, which is kind of dictatorship, quote unquote. Not I say, but I try to learn how America is viewing China this way. So, intention, capability, it's an ideology. These are the 3 components that America feel difficulty with China. If China could use its capacity to expand its ideology to the rest of the world, that would certainly undercut American influence or a pan-American dominion, a US-led world system since the end of the Second World War, which has been prevailing over the last 70 to 80 years. And now US may watching China for the next decade. China may change it to the US disadvantage. As a Chinese, how I look at my own country, which is viewing America increasingly in a negative tone. China no longer views the US as a major partner, major friend. When China's previous leader, Deng Xiaoping, he visited America in January 1979, soon after the 2 countries normalized their relationship. Deng Xiaoping views America is the locomotive for the world development. If a certain country want to make economic progress, they ought to look at America to find something useful. And today, China views itself as a model of the world. So the world should look at China to borrow Chinese experience. China views itself as providing direction of the world development. China has become a new beacon. So America is no longer the sole superpower. China is another beacon, the world is now enjoying two beacons. China cannot accept American lights, and American views China as unacceptable. So in China's view, we are meeting with many difficulties. First, technological decoupling. US has denied China's top cell phone maker, Huawei. Many of you may have already known Huawei, and some of you may have seen Huawei or used Huawei for some time. But Huawei is disappearing because Huawei could only design the world-class chip. It can manufacture the world-class cell phone, but Huawei cannot make a world-class chip. It has to buy those chips from other chip makers, from Taiwan, from South Korea, and from Japan, etc. So this is China's shortcoming. China believe initially this is a time of globalization, which means I do not need to build everything. I need to build something, and others would provide me with those parts that I cannot build well. So I should strengthen my own excellence, and others would build their competence. So when we buy each other, we sell each other, we make the world independent, not dependent. Many of us have kept this idea for a long time, until recently, while we discovered America refused to sell Huawei any modern chips which is more advanced than 14 nanometer. So Huawei now cannot make 5G cell phone. As most of the chip makers in the world use American technology, which has been assembled in the Netherlands made chip making machine. So America has ordered any manufacturer, if we use American technology to produce chips, you cannot sell your advanced chip to Huawei. So Huawei legally cannot access any modern advanced chip. But Huawei can still make 4th generation 4G cell phone. I heard America is discussing the idea and probably will soon announce the new ban. So America would not permit any export to Huawei, targeting to this sole company, not any American products. And probably America would ask all friends using American technology not to sell any of their products to Huawei. At this time, America has applied the current ban to Huawei to the entire China's manufacturing. So all American business cannot sell advanced chip better than 14 nanometer and above to any Chinese person, any Chinese company. And America is asking its partner in other countries to follow suit. So given this, China's economic development, its advanced manufacturing, and somehow its military modernization would be affected. Because when we make a modern car, we need those chips. When we make a navigation system, we need those chips. When China is making its own Boeing or Boeing class, China's long-range airplane, civilian airplane, China needs such chips. And secondary, Taiwan. For a long time, China thanked America for helping China to revert Taiwan from Japan to China, and China made allies in 1941, and they succeeded collaboratively in defeating Japan in 1945. Then Taiwan was brought back to China, and until 1949, when the then KMT regime left for Taiwan. So China has become one country, two governments. Original governments left the mainland for Taiwan, and new government emerged, which is communist regime, which claimed to represent all Chinese, including Chinese in Taiwan, but Taiwan vehemently refused. So America recognized that Taiwan represents China until 1979, when America severed diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Today, China enjoys UN recognition that we represent Taiwan. And some 181 countries recognize China, and they no longer have official relationship with Taiwan, and the US being one of them. Some of them clearly agree with China that Taiwan is a part of China. And few countries like America may not have such a straightforward position, and actually they may have quite a different view. They view Taiwan officially not a country, but in their heart, Taiwan is a country. Officially, they do not maintain a formal relation with Taiwan, but they still enjoy unofficial relation with Taiwan. Sometimes that can be developed to quite official level. So now China has entered Xi Jinping time. Already 10 years, President Xi Jinping has commanded China, and he has started his third term, new term. And many speculate he may want to have Taiwan to be reintegrated with the mainland to make a complete China under his remaining term. Maybe the third term, and maybe he would have one more term, who knows? But he must feel it's a great honor if he can manage this. China is a country which cares integrity, wholeness, oneness, greatness. So reintegration can make China as oneness. So most Chinese living in China have been educated and trained, indoctrinated in a way that it is a major component of Chinese dream. Now Taiwan is worried that their capacity is rising. They are a world-class chip making place. They have lots of benefits provide benefits for the ordinary people, and they enjoy the US type of democracy, political institution. So they are worried if we would impose a unification upon them. And they used to want to impose a unification under their term upon us. Now very few people in Taiwan would think this way. They don't want to have a war, and they don't want, many of them don't want us to unify them under whichever term, including the so-called one country, two system. So Taiwan people are worried, and America are worried. If China would launch some special military operation, like Putin has launched vis-a-vis Ukraine, US may not have sufficient time to handle, because Taiwan's average distance with the mainland is about 150 kilometers, like 100 miles. So for China's modern jet fighters, it takes only few seconds to reach Taiwan. With Mach 2, Mach 3, it takes even less time. So Taiwan is deeply worried. They need some American protection. They need us to be more peaceful, and many of them also want to have a dialogue. So Taiwan's major political party, the party that has lost its control over the mainland, KMT, the Nationalist Party. The previous party leader and Taiwan's top executive leader, Mr. Ma Ying-jeou, is going to visit mainland to visit his ancestors' grave, because many Taiwanese people, they immigrated from mainland, they moved from mainland, they still have a relative in mainland, or the ancestors' grave they would sweep. So Mr. Ma will come to Beijing, and a few years ago, when he was the president, quote unquote, he shook the hand with the mainland Chinese president, Mr. Xi Jinping, in Singapore. So Taiwan want peace. They will see how we would look at Ukraine to handle Taiwan. America wants to have peace, a peace under American dominion, that others would not disrupt the peace that America has made. So U.S. need to assure Taiwan that America will provide a weapon, intelligence, means of backup communication, and also at the time of necessary, U.S. may send its military in. At this time, U.S. has 30 Marine soldiers deployed in Taiwan. Recent Taiwan and the U.S. high-level consultation conducted in Washington, one of the components of the outcome indicated that U.S. would triple its military deployment in Taiwan from 30 to 150. Of course, that's a very small number. But look at the U.S. involvement in Ukraine. 0 U.S. military men and women in uniform was sent. This is a U.S. announcement. Maybe some retired U.S. military personnel are in Ukraine, or some American military people in civilian clothes, not in uniform, who knows? But the U.S. Congress is making many resolutions and even laws to assure Taiwan that they will be okay, to send a strong message to mainland. The mainland need to be very careful because the U.S. will do something. Last August 2nd, the Speaker of the then U.S. House, the Honorable Madame Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan. China was very angry. Soon after she left Taiwan, China launched the military exercise vis-a-vis Taiwan, which lasted for 1 week, which is the largest scale ever since the last decades. And when Kevin McCain won his senator's chairmanship, he indicated that he would follow Pelosi's suit to visit Taiwan in his new capacity as the House Speaker. So that would further make mainland Chinese government to feel very upset and angry, and we would do something that would make China-US to have more chance to have military collision. So these are the situation that I read from China, how mainstream Chinese side. I may or may not belong to this mainstream, but at least I understand the mainstream, this view. It's America that used to help us to bring Taiwan back to China, to bring Taiwan from Japan back to China. It's America that used to fight 2 wars with us in Korea and in Vietnam. It's America that assisted China in a massive way to offer China with technology, capital, markets, and management, and to admit so many Chinese students. I being one of them. In 1989 to 1991, I did my postdoc at Princeton. That made me to have the transition from a physics student to international relations student. So America has helped us so much. So now America is cutting off those technological link away from us, is negating its promise, which it agreed, which it admitted in 1979, when it severed diplomatic relations with Taiwan. US agreed 3 terms with China, severing official relationship. I would say by this time, America has not negated this. America has not established official relationship with Taiwan. Second, withdraw all military personnel from Taiwan. America has violated. Third, America would develop only unofficial relationship with Taiwan. That's America has violated. The U.S. Secretary, Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, met Taiwanese Foreign Minister, quote unquote, for 7 hours in Washington in the last months. That's official relationship. To send the U.S. military to Taiwan, it's an official decision. This, in no sense, is unofficial. China is worried about that the senator would push the envelope to make one after another law resolution to help Taiwan. So when I look at how America views China, institution, intention, technology. China views America, cut off technology, views the rise of China would be a poison to make the global order poisoned. And the US is worried about the advancement of Chinese technology for the American to enjoy less technical age. Therefore, the war in Ukraine has doubled the US worry. And my President Xi Jinping today arrived in Moscow. Excuse me, I caught a cold. I returned from Switzerland yesterday and got cold. So what China and Russia will discuss? America has drawn some red line, not to provide any lethal weapon to Russia. And America has warned China not to provide sensitive dual-use technology and material. And the US promised sanction. And we know thousands of sanctions imposed on Russia. Russia is still hanging on, and China can be more sensitive to the US sanctions. But I don't believe if China would do something US cannot accept, that China would fall because of US sanction. But our two countries could be falling into a more dangerous zone, more deepened distrust, down-spiraling relationship. And more Chinese young students will be unwilling to go to the US to study. And the US may kick Chinese students out when they graduate, or even when they were still studying. The US may not extend a visa to them. I'm deeply upset. We need to do something. In Bali, Indonesia, last November, at the side meeting between the two presidents of China and the US during the G20 summit last year, President Joe Biden asked China to do 6 things. One is to care China's human rights. Second, to better balance China-US trade. Third, Taiwan. China should not intimidate Taiwan. Fourth, Ukraine. China should say something, not to keep the so-called neutral position, but actually more sympathetic with Moscow. China should denounce Russia. Fine. China should take care of North Korea when it threatens to conduct its seventh and the latest rounds of nuclear weapon testing. And, well, I read Professor Kong's message. I would finish in 1 or 2 minutes. And some US citizens in China could not leave China because China's control at the border area, so their passport was denied by China. Could China be kind enough to allow these people to leave China? President Xi gave a very lengthy chat with President Biden, but his key points are two. One is Taiwan. US need to abide by the American promise delivered in 1979. US should not negate its own promise, as that would create a very dangerous outcome for both countries. Second, the global supply chain should not be decoupled. The globalization should maintain its momentum. So if the US would deny certain supply of certain advanced parts or technology to China, US would hurt itself while hurting China. And China would over time overcome those technological challenges, and China will be okay. So all this, about 40 minutes are my introduction, my presentation, where I find China-US relations lies. I would welcome any of you to raise questions, to say you disagree. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Professor Shen, for that.
我走开，一会儿我吃个药片啊。
Okay. So Professor Shen is trying to get some pills to alleviate his cough, and is focused a lot of the discussion on Taiwan, but I would like to follow up on the broader US-China rivalry in the Asia-Pacific region. Could you say a few words about how attitudes of some of the smaller countries in the Asia-Pacific, the middle powers, have shifted in light of US-China rivalry? Certainly, you have this common sort of a pattern where some of the small powers or middle powers don't want to be caught in between, but needless to say, the attitudes of some of these powers have shifted a lot over the past couple of years, right? In light of the continuity, as I said, if you look at a foreign policy, the US government has maintained its continuity over the past couple of years, all the way back to the Obama administration, the Indo-Pacific strategy, or the pivot strategy. Essentially, there's a lot of continuity here. So could you talk a little bit about the dynamics beyond just China and the United States, particularly Southeast Asian countries, India, and those countries? How have their attitudes shifted in light of this growing rivalry between China and the United States? Where do they see how they fit into this rivalry?
I think most of the country in the region want to be comfortable in dealing with China and in dealing with the US individually. But when they were forced to take sides, China says, I don't want you to take sides. You could have two friends at one time. US says the same. US does not push its regional partner to take sides. But probably increasing members in the region feel they have to take sides. And this make, I think most of them feel not good. So the Prime Minister of Singapore Mr. Li Shenlong, made it very clear. When two elephants fought, the grass will be a mess. And Singapore could be one of such grass. So he would think China should be sensible in understanding the others, on the issue of South China Sea, on China's attitude towards the region, etc. But in the meantime, Americans should listen to China. Americans should understand China's ambition. Singapore knows Taiwan is a part of China, and China changed government from pre-1949 to after 1949. Singapore has changed its own recognition from recognizing Taiwan to represent mainland, to recognizing mainland to represent Taiwan. Singapore wants to be a bridge between the two parts across Taiwan Strait. But in case of something bad, nasty, but Singapore has to follow its official recognition that it is the mainland that has represented Taiwan. It's Singapore's position. But Singapore needs to protect its well-being, its shipping rights, the peace and stability in East Asia and in Taiwan Strait that Singapore should legitimately enjoy. So Singapore must hate any disruption of peace and security in the region. So Singapore may be the few, may have the view, well, when the U.S. foreign organization like Pew, Gallup, etc., would test the public view of America and regional countries. Singapore is one of the very few countries that has the majority people having a favorable view of mainland. I think all others surveyed, US, Japan, India, South Korea, Philippines, etc., let alone Canada, Australia, etc., and some European country, they may have increasingly negative view of China. So I say this to say, country feel some uneasiness. They foresee some trouble in the region, and they hate to take sides. When they have to, most of us know they would choose the US. Even Singapore may choose the US. So at this time, South Korea has made probably the permanent peace rapprochement with Japan. That would make American-led two parallel allies, US, South Korea, US, Japan, to be more possible to be fit into a US-led multilateral security arrangement. And both Japan and South Korea are aiding Ukraine, while China, still Chinese leaders have not had a phone conversation with Ukraine after a year. So this is development. US will send its military to India to have the army joint military exercise in an area which is close to China, in a disputed land. In China, we call it Zhangnan, Southern Tibet. In India, Arunachal Pradesh. So US sent military to a place which is under dispute, more close to US open position, that this area belongs to India. If US is any sensible, US should not send military to disputed area. No country should send its presence to the disputed place, like Diaoyu Island of Senkaku. They are under dispute between China and Japan. Any third country should not send its men to climb those rocks of Diaoyu Island. So India is embracing America's Indo-Pacific strategy. If the U.S. Strengthening its military position in this area could make India feel more secure, why not to do? And Japan is more closely partnering with the U.S. And AUKUS, U.S., UK, and Australia. Australia is a unique country. It has been threatened by Japan during the Second World War. Australia always under American protection, and Australia sent military to everywhere the U.S. would wage a war. So now Australia feels that its security environment is getting more complex. Therefore, it will buy, initially it planned to buy few conventional powered attack submarine. But US and UK successfully convinced Australia to abandon those kind of older generation attack submarine, but to buy American and UK version, and the US, UK would educate Australia how to make Australia's own nuclear-powered attack submarine. Those attack submarine, they will attack other targets, but they are powered by nuclear energy. This way, they can be hidden under the surface of the sea for months, hard to be detected. This is how Australia is willing to operate in an area close to China, so Australia will be able to have synergic operation with the US if the US would do something militarily in the region. Australia would be technically able to assist America, and China would not feel opportune for this. Why Australia would do this? Probably China's land reclamation in South China Sea, turning public sea into China's self-sea, turning undersea public rocks to China's rock. So this country feel artificial land should enjoy no sovereignty, but China has already made enlarged 7 of them, including 4, which previously are always underneath the surface of the water. So this gives China its military base to deploy its navy and warplane more close to Australia, close to Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia. So this small country, I think Vietnam is not small. For some time, they want America to have more military presence in the region. So that fits Americans' idea of freedom of navigation. With Americans patrolling, Japan's patrolling, Australia's patrolling, UK, French patrolling in East China Sea and South China Sea, they together want to send a message to China, observing a rule-based international order. So rule is, first of all, United Nations. And under that, there are many other UN-related rules, including UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Philippines sued China at the Permanent Court of Arbitration affiliated with this UNCLOS, and China loses. And China is unwilling to modify its behavior. So this kind of action, they may have both clear economic benefits and potential military benefits, because they can help China to interdict the Indian Ocean portion of the Indo-Pacific strategy. the former CentralCom, when the CentralCom would send its naval equipment to South China Sea, to East China Sea, to Taiwan Strait, they would meet with those Chinese artificially made rocks. So China would advance its defense or its offense by 1,500 kilometers, and they cannot accept this. But in China's view, who gives the U.S. the right to arm Taiwan, to interfere with China's internal affairs? Because when the U.S. recognize Taiwan, Taiwan represents China. When the U.S. recognize China, China represent Taiwan. The two parts are all parts of China. They are one. Together they make China. So U.S. should not interfere with any of China's internal affairs.
Mm-hmm.
But the Americans' view, let me spend one more minute. But the Americans' view is that there is an international sea in between China and Taiwan. China has 12 nautical miles as the sovereign water. Taiwan has 12 nautical miles as the sovereign water. So together they have 40 kilometers as their sovereign water. But the entire Taiwan Strait has, in average, 200 kilometers. So another 160 kilometers. They are not a high sea. They are not open sea. They are open sea in the sense that they are China's EEZ. China has sole right to fish, to dig coal mine or various mineral mine at the bottom of the Taiwan Sea. But China has no military rights. China has no rights to stop any other country from using this sea lane of communication for all purpose, including military purpose. Therefore, if China would send its military across Taiwan Strait, that would constitute a violation of international law. That hurts the U.S. economic interest and the U.S. National security interest. And the U.S. may have the full reason to stop China. So it's not a pure domestic event. It is of international implication.
It sounds like, can I interrupt you, and so that we can have more discussion? I want to make sure others get the chance to ask questions. I want to encourage the audience to type questions in the Q&A session. It sounds like you are basically arguing that the U.S. shifting stances on territorial disputes in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly pertinent to China and the arms race in this region, and the U.S. formation of new security pacts certainly have raised the stakes of security rivalry with China and escalating the tensions there. So how worried are we? How worried should we be? How worried should we be about the conflict? My colleague, Dr. Stalling, asked a question along the lines of what do you see as the difference between rivalry versus conflict?
President Biden often chooses the word. If he can only choose one word, that word is competition, and strategic competition. So his three sentences read as follows. So U.S. will cooperate with China whenever necessary. So U.S. will compete with China whenever it has to. The U.S. will stand with China when it must. So cooperation is the first. But the major part is not cooperation, is competition. And of course, confrontation, rivalry is the last part. U.S. want to build a safe zone, build a region where China-U.S. would not conflict. So today, when we use the term rivalry, it is to warn our audience that the two countries may have their relationship continue to deteriorate. So eventually, no more cooperation. And competition mostly negative. And the remaining relationship will be negative competition, not healthy competition, plus rivalry. Today, US still want China to cooperate if China would improve human rights. And because of the human rights issue, President Putin has been charged by RIC as a criminal. It's a human rights, not because he launched a military option against Ukraine. That's something to be taken by international court, not by IIC. So the US. And of course, if China would like, China can do something that the US would think to cater the US interest. So personally, I don't think we have mapped an area where we cannot return. And balancing China's trade with US. China is doing, and from last November, December, this January, February, for 4 months, China's trade balance with the US is improving. China's trade surplus is reducing for very strange reason. China is not able to receive enough order to manufacture. And China may not have enough money to buy what it wants to buy. And especially when US cuts advanced chip sales to China, even if China has money, China cannot buy. And third, Taiwan. Of course, Madame Tsai Ing-wen would voluntarily visit America to meet with Mr. Kevin and speak at the Reagan Library. That would avoid the awkwardness that Mr. Kevin would visit Taiwan. So all this seems that China-US have managed their relationship, and even Taiwan is helping to manage the relationship, not to explode. And then I do think China has some leeway to speak to North Korea, to speak to Iran, especially after China has made its successful move on persuading Iran and Saudi to restore their diplomatic relationship. This is something US will not do. US think Iran is an evil. Everyone should cut off relationship with Iran. But the US may admire China to be able to make Saudi to restore relationship with Iran. So this would even more complicate China-US relationship. As if China-US would have a war party, China would have guaranteed energy supply from Russia, from Iran, and would guaranteed food supply from Russia. So when the US want to decouple with China, US would not be able to suffocate China to death. US would only push Chinese people to support a majority of them to support the Chinese government. This is not what the US government want to see. And now President is sending its envoy to Israel and Palestine. I don't trust with one round of shuttle diplomacy, China would make Israel and Palestine to resolve their remaining difficulties. But who knows, after a few years, China would not be able to do. And 30, 40 years ago, and even 50 years ago, this is business by Dr. Henry Kissinger. His famous shuttle diplomacy. He has even won Nobel Peace Prize. Now it's China's turn. So when some country, China's near neighbor, feels upset with China's muscle flexing, some other country may feel China as so welcoming. So this is China's changing diplomatic approach to be kind of a war warrior, kind of a muscle flexing, but also China tried to be nice to make a former enemy to shake hands. And who knows, President Xi Jinping's this Moscow visit, after that, he would not visit Kiev. He would not make a phone call with Mr. Zelensky, either from Moscow or from Beijing. So I think China is tackling some very challenging diplomatic water, which China used to not to be able to do, but now China is doing and doing successfully. I cannot imagine US would openly say China's peacemaking, if this country would agree, is a bad thing. US would only say China's peace proposals, 12 points peace proposal, would make Russia to enjoy its current advantage. But China's plan must be accepted by Ukraine. That can generate a peace. Ukraine has not accepted China's current plan proposal, and China's proposal can keep modernizing. So if my president would visit Kiev, that would give a very good message to the world, as good as President Biden's secretive visit to Kiev. That China only want to sell a proposal that is welcomed by both Kiev and Moscow. And then I think China-US relationship can also improve, because the Ukraine issue is the fourth issue that Biden has raised with Mr. Xi Jinping. So I think we have the potential to continue to down spiral the relationship. But if we work hard, we also have the prospect to up spiral our relationship. That's my message.
Yeah, my colleague raised another follow-up question, but then I also have a question I will throw into the mix so that you will answer both as we wrap up our conversation. The follow-up question has a lot to do with the clarity over what we mean by rivalry and what we mean by conflict. And the rivalry, as my colleague points out, invokes the sense of shared rules, whereas conflict basically implies the breakdown of rules. So what's the accurate term to describe, to characterize the current phase of US-China relations?
My view is that I would differentiate the two words as the following. Conflict describes a status. These two countries are at war. No matter they generate, they welcome, or they will be harmed, they are at war. The conflict only describes the status. It does not say who intends and who respond. But the rivalry illusions that the parties at a rival, they view each other as enemy. The party in conflict may not view each other as enemy, but they get involved in a conflict. When two parties, they have not been involved in a conflict, but they rival. So sooner or later, this rivalry relationship may be developed into a status of war.
Mm-hmm. And looking forward, there are some complex factors that might make the bilateral relationship very, very difficult to manage. In the United States, you have the beginning of election cycles, and in Taiwan, we'll have elections soon next year that coincide with the one in the United States. In China, you have a new government that's already in place. So looking forward, do you see any indication from the Chinese government that Beijing might wanted to make adjustments toward the United States along the lines of better managing the bilateral relationship, or you see domestic politics constraining both domestic politics and China's international interests, and also the lack of trust between China and the United States essentially constraining the latitude of Chinese leaders to make any positive change?
Two points. First, China disagrees with the US. China considers that our relationship should be a cooperational relationship. Should be. China places hope, wish. China does not read the status quo. So US says the status quo is competitional and may goes even worse. China says, despite this, we should work together to make the relationship cooperational. Therefore, China refused the American term. So I would think China's wish certainly is better than the US. US is too realistic to read the status quo. China said, yes, I know this, but we should work together in a cooperative way. US say, okay, then you cooperate in 6 areas. And the two leaders have made a major commitment. They both agree that soon they would appoint high-level delegates to meet. So first, Mr. Anthony Blinken would come to China on February the 3rd. And he would meet with his Chinese counterpart, Minister Chen Gang, and the previous Minister Wang Yi, and I think President Xi would also meet with him. This is China's action to respect the American visitor, and at the minister level, at the bureau level, at the section level, discuss how China has worked on those 6 areas. So next stage, maybe Chen Gang would be to US, and the US would say, for China's list, Taiwan and production chain, how US has worked. But unfortunately, 10 hours before Blinken would have bought his airplane, the balloon mistakenly emerged in the US. For the first time in 10 years, China was so humble to say, it's mine, for which I am regretful. China never says that. America used to say that 20 years ago when US-China had the air collision.
Incident.
And the US Ambassador Joe Prior, the former commander-in-chief of the PACOM, spoke in Beijing. The US deeply regrets for the loss of Chinese property and life. Deeply regrets for its airplane entering into China without receiving China's prior agreement. So Chinese side translated this as 歉意, 美国深表歉意. It can be read as apology, 道歉的歉, or 抱歉的歉. So China intentionally mistaken these 2 歉, 道歉, apology, and regret. Of course, this time China would not apologize, because China discovered the reason was that this balloon was blown by the westward wind mistakenly into the US. Therefore, we did not make it happen intentionally. Why we should apologize. But after all, it entered the US territorial space, and for this, we feel regretful. 抱歉. But then the US repeatedly bluffed China. You violate international law, you violate the US territorial space, and you should apologize, you should commit never to make this happen again. So at the Munich Security Conference, Wang Yi had a meeting with Blinken. That ended unhappily. Wang Yi said, you guys, hysterics. Chinese side suggest to the US government, this is a time for you to show your maturity, your leadership. You must investigate to prove China is lying, then to destroy all chance to improve relationship. Even if, that's my personal interpretation, even if China lied, you have to take its face value to inspect, to verify with China internally, not to make an open noise. And America may not avoid similar situation to happen in the future when Americans send reconnaissance airplane into China or close to China. America also needs China to tackle such incidents in a mature way. I think that event, unfortunately, has wasted more than 1 month for the two countries to talk. If the two countries had already talked, they may divide, make 6 working groups: North Korean group, and Ukraine group, and Taiwan group, human rights group, trade group, American citizens exiting China's group. But now nothing happened.
Yeah.
But if China, President Xi can make some surprise peace through this Moscow visit, America may consider that this is China's real effort to make Europe more peaceful.
Yeah.
Then America will be more willing to cater some of China's points on supply chain, maybe given some Chinese business some advanced chip, promising not to use them in military.
Yeah. Well, I think we all agree that what happened prior to Blinken's trip was very unfortunate, and there's still a lot we don't know. But unfortunately, leaving aside what we don't know, what we do know, however, makes it very clear that public opinions and public sentiments really constrain the freedom of action on the part of the decision makers right now in both countries, right? That's what we are worried about. Unfortunately, the dialogues, all the institutional mechanisms built over the previous administrations are no longer there. That makes the relationship really worrisome. Well, thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of the hour, or on the end of our dialogue. I thank you, Dr. Shen, for staying up late in Shanghai. Right now, it's already way over midnight. You've burned a lot of midnight oil. I've thoroughly enjoyed your discussion. Again, thank you so much again for your enlightening discussion and sharing your thoughts with us. We look forward to continuing this discussion with you in the future. Thank you very much, and have a good night or good morning.
As a beneficiary of China-U.S. improved relationship 3 decades ago, I maintain my mission to bridge between two countries honestly and objectively, in order for us to gain mutual respect and resolving our difference.
Well, thank you. I would like to echo your I would like to applaud your commitment, and would say that we all should do the same thing. And we, as you stated at the very beginning, we all benefit from a good relationship. I think not just folks in China and the United States, but people around the world all benefit, because we have so many issues that we need to work together, such as climate change, amongst many others. I would like to also thank those online for participating in this discussion, for your patience and for your questions. And I look forward to seeing you again in our in-person event in early April. We have a conversation with Dr. Nicholas Lardy on U.S.-China decoupling, and he will assess whether that's a myth or reality. With that, let me end here, and thank you again, Dr. Shen, and goodbye.
Thank you, Professor Kuhn, and thank you everyone for participating. See you next time.
See you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.